Hi, John.
Hey, everybody, how you doing?
Okay, we are now live.
Okay. John, I'm not sure if you heard my introduction. Carol's father passed away on Monday. And so I'm assuming the role of chair today.
Yep.
Okay. Why don't we begin by doing a roll call, and I'm just going to go across my screen to make sure that we formally identify ourselves as participating in the meeting today. So, Carter?
I'm here.
Okay. Mike?
I'm here.
I'm here as Alan Esquitz's chair, and Rick?
Yep.
I don't see.
Hey, everybody.
There you are. Okay. Rick Devereaux. Okay. And from the city, can we identify? We have city attorney, I see. John?
Yes, Deputy City Attorney John Maddox.
Okay. And the chief?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay. And I see Peggy from HR.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay. And okay. Anybody else? Okay. So I'd like to formally call the meeting to order today. The first agenda item that we have is the approval of the minutes from both January the 8th and July 2nd. Are there any comments, additions, or corrections? If so, please identify yourselves. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from January the 8th and July the 2nd?
I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes from both the January and July minutes as they are.
Okay, and John, Mike, can you identify yourself?
It's Mike on.
Okay. Is there a second?
This is Carter Webb. I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor? Can we go through a roll call? Carter?
Yes.
Rick?
Yep, aye.
Okay. Mike?
Aye.
And I approve the minutes also. Minutes from both meetings stand approved then. The next item of business, I don't know if we have any updates for today, but we do have some unfinished business. So I'm going to ask city's assistant attorney to take over right now and discuss the point that's on the agenda, which is substantive rules. John?
Thank you, Alan. Alan, my name is John Maddox. I'm the Deputy City Attorney. We've talked several times before, and we talked about these substantive rules. I wanted to give you all an update as to where those stand currently. The city has drafted up a set of rules, and we've been, COVID definitely threw us for a loop as far as getting this done as quickly as we would like, but nevertheless, we have continued to meet with the PBA primarily, and I see Rick Cullis is here, and it's been very productive dialogue, and everybody's been working. I feel what I've enjoyed about this process so far is everybody's been working in good faith. It seems like there's been a very good faith effort to try to arrive at something that works for everybody, and we're continuing that. I am moving now beyond speaking with just the PBA. However, they've been most agreeable to talking with us, and they've been good partners. So now we're starting to open up negotiations, or not negotiations, but discussions with the FOP. And from there, I expect to also speak with firefighters. As I've told you in the past, they have indicated they were not so keen on the idea of working with us on these rules, but I'm going to keep trying because, as I've said before, we want their input. We have no interest in rules that they view as just fundamentally unfair, that they did not have, or that came about as not as the result of a fair process. So that's sort of where we stand. I covered our draft rules with you previously. And actually, before I move on to that, Rick, I see Rick's here. Rick, do you have anything you'd like to add to that? Or might be a good point for you to interject.
No, I think it's been very productive. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to have the discussions that we had, and I think we've made a lot of progress. We do have a little bit more work to do, obviously, on some issues, but a lot of that kind of hinges on the chief and his desire to implement some of the recommendations that we're going to make as they apply to these substantive rules. So that's kind of where we stand right now.
And Rick is definitely right. And what he's talking about is what we've done, this first set of substantive rules, like we talked about, is we've defined a lot of the terms in the Civil Service Act. And it's not a huge thing. This is, I think, 3 pages in total. But we're looking to define, what does it mean for somebody to be a member of the classified service? That's defined in the law, but we want to make clear that it does not include anybody within a probationary period, which is something that we're allowed to do under those rules. We're going to say what's a demotion. It's an involuntary and a permanent reassignment into a position in a lower pay grade. We're going to talk about what does it mean for somebody to be discharged. You think these are things that are self-defining. They're not. These are all matters that have been the subject of discussion, sometimes a lot of discussion in prior Civil Service Board cases. So we're looking at involuntary and permanent separation from employment with the city, due to a violation of city policy or unsatisfactory work performance. Taking out things like the idea of constructive termination. That's not going to be something that falls into the Civil Service Act. What does it mean for somebody to be entitled to a promotion or a raise in pay? What does it mean for somebody to be suspended? What does it mean for somebody to be transferred? You recall we had a big hearing about that last October that dealt with the idea of a transfer. The other thing, and this is, I got some feedback even from Civil Service Board members after a couple of our hearings that they felt like, what is the standard we're supposed to be judging these things by? Justified is a very slippery term. As you know, when an employee is, for instance, discharged, they can bring an action before the Civil Service Board, and it's up to the city to justify the decision to terminate that employee. And it showed that decision was justified. Well, that's kind of a slippery term. What does it mean for something to be justified? What is just cause? These are hard things to define. So what we sought to do here is to better define that standard. So essentially, an employment action is per se justified if it's shown that the employee violated any law or city or departmental policy, rule, or code of conduct, and they received due process. That's going to be justified. Then it even goes further and says, how do you determine whether the employee violated a rule of conduct or a policy or a law? There, it's you look at the decision making that the chief engaged in, and chief or the department director engaged in, and you view that according to an abusive discretion standard, which means that if a department director's challenge decision is plausible in light of the evidence available at the time of the decision, the board would conclude that the violation occurred, even if it might have weighed the evidence differently. That is obviously a bit of a change, bit of a thought, different way of thinking about the Civil Service Board, and that's one of the places where we've had to work things out with the PBA, for instance. I think that's what Rick's talking about, is we still have things to work out. Our thinking on this, though, is that we are going to, while we are placing more discretion in the hands of the chief of police, we're thinking that the APD at least will put in place a disciplinary matrix. This is a tool that's used in a lot of police agencies where certain policy violations, you look at your grid, and if it's this type of policy violation, then this is the level of punishment. If it's this type of policy violation, it's this level of punishment. It's the second violation, you look at this grid, and it helps you figure out what the appropriate level of discipline is. This helps take some of the subjectivity out of the process. It gives us all a little bit better idea of what people can expect for certain conduct. And the PBA has given indication that they are okay with this. I said I'm going to talk with FOP about the same thing. And the chief has said that he is on board with putting in place a disciplinary matrix for the Asheville Police Department. So I'm sure the devil will be in some of those details, and there'll be some parts of that to be worked out, but we're committed to working those out. And I think the PBA has shown themselves to be trustworthy partners in helping us do that so far. So we're hopeful that this is going to work. That said, the hope is that next month, we're going to be putting rules in front of you to vote on. The process would be for you to, once you pass rules, they can then be sent to the city. They are then to be sent to the city council, who can then amend and pass them or reject them. It's ultimately up to the city council to put in place these substantive rules under the Civil Service Act. So that's pretty much my spiel at this point. I'm happy to answer any questions. And Rick, please feel free to jump in if you feel like I've missed anything at all, because I feel like y'all are an important part of this.
John, this is Alan again. I think the assumption is that we're going to have input from both the fire department and the FOP between now and next month. So I would hope that everybody has had an opportunity to review these draft definitions and rules as they are drafted at this point in time. And if there's any differences, we talked about this back in November, that each of the organizations has the opportunity to submit their comments in writing. So we have the ability not only to see your draft, but the differences that the other organizations may have with that draft. So I would want that to be part of our discussion, whether it's next month or the month after. But we talked about this kind of a protocol back in November when we met and we're talking about substantive rules at that time. I have one question though, and I was just taking some notes as you were talking, and then I'll let the other board members comment also. You said something to the effect, and I hope I got this right, that if a chief in the fire or police department makes a decision at that time and they followed all the rules basically and with the evidence that's available to them, the board must conclude, I think you said, that the violation occurred, and even if it weighed the evidence differently, I think that takes some of our prerogatives away from actually having a hearing and making a decision whether the action was justified or not. That's just my thought.
Well, I think you're. My watchword on these things is honesty, and I think you're right. You are placing more discretion in the hands of the chief of police to say, because you are defining what is justified, and you're deciding that unless the police chief is abusing the discretion he holds as chief of police to run his police department and discipline his employees, then his decisions should stand. And that's been the idea, and that's part of the reason why we're trying to get as close to fit as we can between what we want and this policy, this set of rules. The APD with a disciplinary matrix in place and using that disciplinary matrix is going to help assuage the idea of a police chief abusing their discretion, because it takes away some of their discretion in certain cases. However, this also this set of tools over here, though, will recognize that the chief possesses discretion. And so long as he's not going completely off the reservation with that discretion, then his decision should be afforded some kind of deference. That is the idea behind this. So yes, it does take away this board's ability to just willy-nilly decide that it knows better than the chief in certain cases. So long as the chief is not abusing his discretion, then under these rules, the board would need to uphold the chief's decision-making.
Okay, again, and I'll just make one more comment, and then turn it over to the other board members. We are a quasi-judicial board, and we have the authority under this Sessions Act to determine what action, whether the action taken was justified or not. So that's our responsibility. We need to, I think, continue to have that ability to review the actions taken and weigh the evidence as a board. So again, from what I hear, and I haven't seen the document that you have, but from what I hear, I may have a difference on that point. Let's turn it over to the other board members. So comments, and please identify yourself.
Yeah, Alan Rick Devereaux here. I guess I have two comments or questions. One is, when will the board get to see the draft rules? Because to my knowledge, we have not yet seen the draft. And I would think that, and then a comment related to that is, once we see the draft, we'll have to know, like Alan has indicated, what degree of coordination, if any, has been done with external or with stakeholders. I'll just leave it at that. And I would think that once we know that, then the board will be in a position to discuss it and do what degree of coordination we think is still outstanding. Because, for instance, John, if your coordination is limited, then the board might decide we really need to get some input from some of these other groups before we, give our stamp or make any adjustments to the substantive rules. So I'll just hold there.
What I can say is that you would have the rules before the next meeting. I would hope to have it to you in time for you to be able to give it adequate consideration. And I'm trying to coordinate these meetings with various groups. It can present its challenges. For instance, the FOP has members who are not even city employees. A lot of members who are not city employees. So if I'm getting their input, it can be somewhat difficult sometimes to coordinate those meetings. And certainly the board has the ability to decide that it wants more information, to not take an action at the very next meeting. That's what I'm saying. I would love for the board to take action at the very next meeting. I would love for nothing more than for the PBA, the FOP, and the Asheville Firefighters Association to stand there right with me and say, here are the rules. We all worked on it. It's great. And we're all so very happy with it. And then break out the guitar and sing Kumbaya. I don't know that that's going to happen universally, but that's what we're shooting for. And it'll be up to you at that time to decide if you want to take more time to get more input, whatever. I do think there will come a point where you need to vote on rules or not, to send some rules to the city council. We've been too long without rules, and certainly this has been a long process we've been going on since I undertook this with you in sort of partnership with you. Unfortunately, I would like to have had this done last March, but the world turned upside down. Right. So here we are.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that we want to rush the process, but just like it's taken, due to the world conditions and everything with COVID, it's taken you some time to get the draft to this form and do some preliminary coordination. We're just going to need some time. That's all. And especially, we'll need time to review the draft, have a discussion about it at our next board meeting, and then just determine a way ahead. So that's all.
Yeah, John, I concur with Rick. This is Alan Eskovitz again, that we may not be able to vote at the next meeting or the meeting that we actually see the draft, even if we have it a week to 10 days beforehand. We may need a meeting just for discussion at that point in time, but we'll see. It's hard to say. There may be agreement at the next meeting, but we'll have to wait and see. Carter? Comments?
And I think it all makes sense. I mean, I'd like to see it too, and I don't know that we can commit to making the decision at the next meeting. I don't know. We just have to see. I'm not sure that's what John's expectations are. Is it, John? That we would vote at the next meeting? Is that what you said at the beginning?
I would hope so. That would be my hope, that you review it beforehand. Everybody says, okay, this is what we're doing, and you go on. If you have to discuss it for a while at the meeting or come to some sort of compromise or however you like. I also understand how these things work. And so I would say that if you need to have additional discussion or have additional actions taken before taking a vote, after you've seen the rules or at the next meeting, then you're certainly free to do that. And I think that would be a reasonable thing to do. I might even say that you might schedule a special meeting if to expedite this process once you've had a chance to discuss after the next meeting, if that's what you need. This is, as you know, there's so much talk about policing and the way that policing is policed itself, that this has eyes on it. It's really important to the community. It's important to the city council to see something happen here. So we are trying to expedite, trying to move it as fast as we can, and as long as we can ensure we still have a good product at the end of it.
Carter, any other questions or comments?
I mean, have to see how it plays out. I don't really have anything else without knowing what we're looking at.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I tend to agree. Without actually seeing it, it's hard to say whether I'd be ready to vote or do anything on it just at the next meeting.
Okay. John, our outside counsel, any comments?
No, sir. I mean, I agree with everything the board members have said. I think you need to be comfortable with it before you act on it, and having sufficient lead time is going to be a decision to be made. You know, when you have that, I know you're going to need more lead time than you do for just a sort of a general, board approval of like you have today of a promotional process or something fairly simple like that. It's a significant thing to consider how you're going to sort of set boundaries for your future consideration of your main function of the quasi-judicial employee hearings. I completely agree with my colleague, Mr. Maddox, though, that you definitely need these substantive rules at some point soon, because, for examples, and he gave the primary one I always think of, justification is the hinge on which all of your decisions are made. And as you all know, we've looked at in the past, there is zero useful guidance for you in the interpretations of the state's courts about what that means. It says, look at the dictionary. And so, we are going to, it will be very useful to you as a body to have substantive rules. And to that notion, Mr. Chairman, you and I have talked about this. I really do hope that any stakeholder groups that are being given the opportunity now to weigh in on the review of this, and I know that the city has proceeded in some good faith to try to get them to see what the city wants to propose and to respond to it. I hope they'll do that, because if they don't, then they may be bypassing the opportunity to let you know as a board what their take on those things is. Agree or disagree with them, at least give some response. So I hope that they'll come to the table in good faith and discuss it for the good of the whole entity. So that's my thought, Mr. Chairman.
John, if the board can do anything, and John, John Henning want to step in on this too, to help encourage the other two organizations to respond and hopefully, provide input. If there are differences, we'd like to see those in writing along with your document. But if we can do anything to help them along the way to respond to your draft, let us know.
I don't think getting them to respond is going to be the problem. It's going to be getting them to respond in a positive manner. And I'm hope springs eternal. I'm committed to trying, and I'm bolstered by the, like I said, the very good faith showing we've had from the PBA and their willingness to work with us. And they've made it better. They have the input they've given us has made a lot of these rules better, and they will work better for the agency and for the officers.
And we appreciate that, and I appreciate Rick Tollis's efforts in this area. Thank you.
Hey, Alan,
Sir?
Rick Devereaux again. I just want to make one comment. This is just my thought as a board member, since so much of our conversation today was over this one term that probably is going to be the most difficult or challenging to make sure we nail down the wording right, and that is for justified.
Yes.
Because as John pointed out, both Johns pointed out, that's often the crux of decisions this civil service board reaches. I would personally lean against a definition that conflated justified with is the decision within the decision maker's discretion. Because to me, those are two different words, discretion versus justified. Discretion more is the person in authority have the legal basis for that decision. Are they operating within their legal authority? Justified to me implies other factors that have to do with reasonableness, proportionality, yes, some subjectivity, and I think this board has always been prepared to sort of defer to decision makers in those subjective areas. But if we just say, well, did the decision maker have the authority to make the decision, then the board has no choice but to say that that decision was justified. To me, that's a little sketchy, in terms of the definition.
Mr. Dever, I don't want to give the impression that this board does not have any authority to overrule a bad decision. That's certainly not the case. Abusive discretion is a well-worn, well-trod legal standard applied in many administrative law cases. And Mr. Henning, please call me out if I speak out of school, because I'm going a little bit off the cuff here. But abusive discretion, it doesn't mean that you have to uphold any decision just because the chief of police made it. I try to think about examples of where this could come up. For instance, let's say you have a allegation that an officer was at a bar during his duty shift, that he was drinking at the bar, and he shows up for his pre-disciplinary conference and says, "Look, Chief, I was on duty. I was across town. Here's the incident report I filled out. Here's my information here's my body camera footage showing at the time that I was alleged to be at this bar, I was on the other side of town." And the chief says, "Well, you know what? I've been trying to get rid of you for a while. Now I've got my chance." Or he says, "Well, you know what? I don't believe you. I think you doctored that body camera footage," or whatever. The chief decides, and against clear evidence that this person has violated policy. At that point, if it was to come to you, you would still have the ability to say, "No, the chief did not weigh this evidence at all. He abused the discretion he has. Therefore, we're going to overrule him." So that's sort of an extreme example, but that helps illustrate the point that it's not, you have to just accept blanket decisions by a chief of police. That's not the intention of this.
Okay, that helps me a lot, so I appreciate that.
And I don't disagree. This is John Henry. I don't disagree that abuse of discretion is a widely applied standard. I want to see it in your draft substantive rules and be able to fully think through its implication as against the Civil Service Act to be able to advise the board. And
John, I would be glad to go ahead and provide you with the draft that we're working on right now, with the understanding that we're still talking with folks and this is subject to change.
That'd be appreciated.
I would only, again, this is Alan Eskovitz. I would only want to add that the decision was derived in a fair and balanced way by the supervisor. So, and that would help us with the term justification too. Mike, I haven't heard from you. You're muted. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, somebody muted me. That's okay.
No.
Anyway, yeah, I'm still in the. You're going to have to show me in writing what we're talking about, because at this point in time, I'm getting two takes on it. One that we are giving up our ability to decide, and just leaving that to the chiefs. Although the way it was just explained eliminates some of that concern. It's just I'm going to hold off judgment until I actually see something in writing so that I can actually look at it.
Yeah. Anything else from the board on this matter?
I think Mr. Chalice was raising his hand for something.
Oh,
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Rick, you're muted right now. You are muted. Okay.
So I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Webb. I just want to make sure that the board understands that the PBA has always supported a just cause standard, and we always will. I think where we're talking about this issue, again, I'm not as confident as Mr. Maddox is about the getting a vote next month, because obviously we need to see a policy in place from the chief before we would consider the changes to that abusive discretion standard from a just cause standard. That as an organization, that is what we have always adhered to for our members, and that obviously is what we'll always try to adhere to. But we are willing to work toward an abusive discretion standard if we have a policy in place that, in a matrix type style, lays out what the disciplinary actions can and can't be for any given offense.
And what is this? This is Alan Eskovitz again. What is the status of that with the department? Do you know?
Mr. Maddox will be able to better answer that question.
What I can tell you is that my discussions with the chief, he's open to it. Obviously, it's a fairly involved process to put in place a policy that big at APD. He's going to want his own officers' input. He's going to make sure that they are on board, and there's some things to be worked out. Because this board does need substantive rules, I would hope that we would be comfortable moving ahead with the idea that this is in place, this has been agreed to, and that we understand this is what we're going to be moving toward. Obviously, that might not happen. I don't know at this point, but it's in the pipeline. APD's got a lot of balls in the air right now,
Sure.
as you can imagine. So putting in place a sweeping new disciplinary policy might be a heavier lift than, obviously than next month. But I would hope that this all can move together. We're capable of doing more than one thing at a time. And I think we can make that happen. I think we've shown PBAs. I think they trust us enough at this point that we are committed to doing that. I frankly think it makes the whole thing work better, because we don't have to worry so much about whether somebody's abused their discretion if they're applying these very clear rules from this very clear policy.
This is Alan Eskovitz again. If that can be coordinated, that'd be great. If you could coordinate that with the APD, that would really be helpful.
And Mr. Chairman, this is John Henning. I think there may be a way, and if John can share with me where he is in the drafts, and I can begin to work through some language that might be able to circle what we're talking about by saying, whether or not there was an abuse of discretion based on a duly adopted disciplinary policy within, so you don't have to say that one that's in effect as of the date of your substantive rules to make it effective in the future to work in the way that I think we're headed to. Does that make sense? I think we can find a different way to get to the same place.
Good. Are there any further comments from the board on this matter? Okay, John, Maddox, thanks. Thank you very much for today.
No worries. Y'all have a good day.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Moving along on the agenda, we now have new business, and the chief from the fire department is going to be talking about some new changes or proposed changes on the promotional process.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We also have Chief Hines, our fire marshal, on the call as well that can answer any questions. We are here today before the board for the consideration of some proposed changes to minimum requirements for 2 of our positions. And those positions are Senior Deputy Fire Marshal and Assistant Fire Marshal. If I could draw the board's attention to the document that is titled AFD Career Ladder. As y'all remember, this is a master document that we use in the department that has all of the minimum requirements for all of our positions in order for someone to participate in that promotional process. If you scroll to Assistant Fire Marshal, you will see some text that is in red. That red text that is the proposed changes for Assistant Fire Marshal. And the purpose of these changes is to broaden our applicant pool. We currently have possibly only 2 members of our department that are interested in that position. It is unclear if both are currently or will be currently qualified by meeting all of these requirements by the time that we start that promotional process very soon. So our goal would be to make these minimum requirements preferred rather than required to participate in the process. The Assistant Fire Marshal is an entry-level position. It's not a supervisory position. And our Fire Marshal and myself feels comfortable that folks who did not have those minimum requirements could be taught the job and could obtain those certifications after promotion that would keep us from carrying voids in those positions. Similarly, if you scroll down to Senior Deputy Fire Marshal, for the same reasons, those requirements also are preferred rather than required. You can see that red text. What that also will allow us to do, if we don't have enough internal interest, and we have 1 current vacancy at Senior Deputy Fire Marshal, and if we don't have enough applicants internally that are interested and qualified, that will open up the field so that more people within the department could participate if they were interested. And it also will allow us to open up and take applicants out from the outside. And for these 2 positions, I think that is very important because we do have such a small applicant pool internally that are both interested and qualified. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions from the board. One other important thing is these recommended changes were reviewed and discussed by the department's internal promotional criteria advisory committee and did have the support of the committee for these changes. These changes have our fire marshal's support as well as my support.
Okay. Let's open it up to the board. Any comments? Questions? Okay. Is this can we take a vote on this now? Is that, Chief? You need
Yes. Yes, I would ask that the board approve these changes that were presented and highlighted in red on this document.
Okay. Is there a motion on the floor now to support the changes made for the Senior Deputy Fire Marshal and Assistant Fire Marshal?
So moved. I'll make a motion.
I'm sorry?
This is Carter Webb. I'll make that motion. I'll so moved. Is what you said.
Okay.
This
Is
Mike
there a
on.
second?
Mike on, I'll second.
Okay. Can we take a vote now? Carter?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Aye for me, Chair. Okay, approved. You have another change, Chief, I see.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so the other document I'd like to have the board take a look at is the one titled AFD Promotional Process Summary 2021. And this is a document that outlines the process component and the weights of each process component for all of our position. And if you scroll down to Lieutenant, you'll see some changes there in red. And we received feedback from the department and from candidates who have been through our process that the lieutenant's position, which is our first frontline supervisory position, within our current process, promotional process, we do not measure the soft skills, the leadership skills, how to manage personnel, how to handle conflict. And so the desire was to insert a tool, a role play exercise that would measure the candidate's ability for those leadership supervisory skills. And the feedback from the department, as well as our promotional criteria advisory committee, which I fully support, is that was more important than the written paper, which is currently what candidates do. They write a paper on a topic and then that's scored. So the recommendation is to eliminate the written paper in that lieutenant's process and instead have a role play exercise. There was also, the candidates were measured on how to fill out an incident report. And so removing both of those things, replacing it with role play, and then adjusting the weights so that it still comes out to the same amount as indicated in that multiplier column. Similarly, if you scroll down to Battalion Chief, for the same reasons, adding a role play exercise in the Battalion Chief process rather than a performance assignment. So that would measure the candidate's ability for that leadership, for those soft skills, rather than measuring performance, because the performance was measured with the technical and leadership, written testing, the emergency scene management, the position paper, and the structured interview. And so that was recommended by our promotional criteria advisory committee and supported completely by me. And so I would be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Chief, one question. This is Alan Eskovitz. The performance assignment, how was that conducted? Was that actually in the field under supervised conditions, or?
The first round that when we started doing the performance assessment years ago, was exactly that. We had our interim deputy chief at the time. He would ride with candidates for a set number of shifts and evaluate their performance. One thing that was very difficult for that was to be able to reproduce the same situations for all the candidates. And so we identified that pretty clear after doing that for the first time, because some candidates might have more fires that they responded to. They might have more personnel issues than another candidate. So it didn't seem to be a fair evaluation that could be reproduced. So what we then began doing was we would simulate those types of things so that it would be equivalent for all of the candidates. So in a sense, we were doing a role play exercise. But to answer your question, it currently, and it has not for the last few process has been a direct observation of their performance in the field because it just could not be done equitably.
And as you mentioned, all these changes have gone before your internal board too for approval.
Yes, sir. That is
Yeah.
that is
And there's
correct.
concerns there.
And,
Okay,
and they were supported unanimously.
good. Are there any questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, Rick Devereaux, I've got one question for the chief. Chief, on all this makes sense to me. On the role-playing exercise, how will the candidates be graded or evaluated within those exercises? Will there be some sort of a score sheet or some kind of criteria that the evaluator will use?
Yeah, yes, and that's an excellent question. And so what each evaluator, and we use all external evaluators that are fire service professionals from other departments so that there's not a chance that they might have a relationship or know the candidate and have any bias. And so those external evaluators will be given a scoring sheet, and that scoring sheet will also include a rubric that says these expected behaviors in this situation would receive this type of a range of score, whereas if they met expectations, these would be the behaviors that we would expect. And if they did not meet expectations, then these would be the behaviors that we would expect. And so that provides a consistent means for those external evaluators to say, okay, yes, they did not exhibit these behaviors, so I'm going to use my professional judgment and score them in this category.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chief. That sounds great.
Thanks, Rick. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion that the board approve the promotional process for the promotional process changes for both lieutenant and battalion chief. Is there a motion?
This is Mike Hahn. I'd make a motion that we approve the fire department's promotional process components for both of those two groups.
Okay.
And Rick Devereaux will second.
Okay. All in favor? Carter?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
And Chair? Aye. Is there any other business, Chief?
No, sir.
Like to bring before the board?
No, sir. Thank you, and y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you for doing what you're doing. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
The last part of our meeting is public comment. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to provide any comments for the board?
Public comment is received beforehand, and we did not receive any through our public input platform. So no public comment that I'm aware of.
Thank you, Beth. Nobody else participating then from the public. Is there any other business that the board needs to discuss today? Listening to the board members. The informal discussion. Hearing none, I'd like to take a motion, hear a motion for us to adjourn our September meeting. And is there a motion?
I'd make a motion that we adjourn. It's Mike Hahn.
Carter Webb, I'll second that motion.
Okay, roll call. Carter?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Alan? Aye. And we'll see you all next month then. Thank you for being here today. Peggy, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
HR department, thanks for your assistance. Carol,
Thank you.
Caroline also, thanks. See you all next month.